The night sky above Aeloria was filled with stars, but none of them gave comfort anymore. For weeks, the Vorath swarm had been pressing closer to the quiet colony world. Their ships were countless, like shadows spreading across the galaxy. Wherever they went, they stripped planets bare, consuming everything in their path. No one had ever truly defeated them, only delayed them. The Aelorians were not a warlike people. Their society was built on art, philosophy, and science. They treasured knowledge, harmony, and peace. They had little in the way of weapons, only a handful of defense platforms orbiting their world. They had never needed more. Now their leaders gathered in a great hall carved from white stone, their long robes trailing across the polished floor. The fear in their voices filled the chamber. "The Vorath will reach us within 3 cycles," said Elder Solian, his hands trembling. "The council fleets are too far. They will not arrive in time." Another elder, her voice sharp with desperation, leaned forward. "We must beg the council to act faster. Perhaps if they hear our pleas again—" "They already answered," Solian interrupted, his eyes filled with sorrow. "They said it would take months to move their forces, months. By then we will be gone." Silence fell over the hall. No one wanted to speak the truth aloud. The Aelorian colony was doomed. Finally, one of the younger leaders rose. "Then we must send the signal farther. Not just to the council, but to anyone who might hear. We will send it across every channel, every frequency, every open path. Perhaps someone will answer." The others hesitated. It was foolish to hope. Who among the stars would risk themselves for strangers? Still, in the end, despair drove them to act. The signal was sent. A message carried on light and code, a cry for help echoing through the void. "This is Aeloria. We are under threat by the Vorath swarm. We ask for aid. We beg for mercy, please. Someone answer." Far away, on a world that the Galactic Council rarely spoke of except in whispers, the message was received. Earth. The Council's records described Earth as a death world, a planet where storms tore across continents. Volcanoes split the land and predators filled the seas and skies. The Council viewed its inhabitants with suspicion. They called humans stubborn, reckless, and unpredictable. Most worlds avoided them, fearing what such a harsh upbringing had made of their species. But when the signal reached Earth, it did not fall on deaf ears. In a meeting hall beneath the flags of many nations, representatives gathered. The Aelorian message played across the screen once more, their voices full of desperation. When it ended, silence hung over the humans. One general spoke first. "The council will not help them in time. We've read the reports on the Vorath. This colony is as good as lost." Another leader shook her head. "Then we should send what we can. At least try. If we don't, who will?" Arguments filled the room. Some said humanity was not ready to fight such a powerful enemy. Others warned that sending a fleet would risk too many lives. Yet across the world, the message had already spread beyond governments. Ordinary people had heard it. Veterans who had fought in old wars, pilots who longed for the stars, engineers who believed in building hope out of scrap and steel. They were not asked to go. They volunteered. A coalition formed quickly, not out of politics but out of human stubbornness. Ships were patched together from old cargo haulers, converted warships, and experimental crafts that had never been tested in real combat. Crews came from many nations, speaking many languages but sharing one purpose. They called themselves the Relief Fleet. The council laughed at them when word spread. "A swarm will devour them," some said. "This is not bravery. It is suicide." But the humans did not listen. They had heard the cry for help, and that was enough. In the skies above Aeloria, days passed with no sign of aid. The people grew weary, preparing only for the end. Families gathered in their homes, holding each other. Children asked why no one was coming. The elders had no answers. Then one night, the long-range sensors of the colony stirred. Operators leaned over their stations, blinking in disbelief. Ships. Multiple ships. Entering the system. Panic spread first. They thought the Vorath had arrived early. But then the data scrolled across the screens, showing the signatures of the approaching fleet. Crude engines, mismatched hulls, designs not seen among council worlds. The operators stared at one another in shock. "It is not the Vorath," one whispered. It's something else." The fleet came closer, their ships scarred but determined. At the front, a flagship bore a simple emblem painted across its hull. A blue and green world, half-shadowed, surrounded by stars. The humans had arrived. The Aelorian leaders stood on the balcony of their hall, gazing at the night sky. Tiny sparks of light grew brighter as the human fleet descended. Elder Solian clutched the rail with both hands. It cannot be true. They actually came. Beside him, a younger counselor breathed out, her eyes wide with wonder. Who are they? The answer came from the first transmission, a voice strong and steady across the channel. This is the Earth Relief Fleet. Aloria, you are not alone. We heard your call. We are here to help. For the first time in many days, hope returned to Aloria. The Alorians had never seen humans before. Their records only carried fragments from the Council archives, stories of a harsh homeworld, strange traditions, and endless conflicts. Many had believed that humans were nothing but myths told to frighten children. Yet now, standing in the skies above Aloria, was a fleet built by those same people. When the first human ships docked with the colony's orbital platforms, the Alorians gathered nervously. Their leaders, dressed in silver robes, greeted the strangers with cautious politeness. The humans who stepped out were not what they expected. They were shorter than some Alorians, taller than others, their bodies strong but not monstrous. Their eyes carried a fire, sharp and alert, scanning everything as if measuring threats unseen. Their uniforms were mismatched, some bearing old military marks, others patched from civilian clothes. These were not a polished army. Captain Elias Grant, the chosen leader of the relief fleet, offered a simple bow. We came as fast as we could, he said, his voice steady. We know what you face. We cannot promise miracles, but we will fight. The Alorian counselors exchanged uneasy looks. Elder Solian finally spoke. Your fleet is small. The Vorath will bring thousands of ships. You bring only dozens. Elias met his gaze without hesitation. Dozens can be enough if they know how to fight. Preparations began at once. The humans moved quickly, their crews spreading across the orbital defenses and the colony itself, where the Alorians had resigned themselves to despair. The humans acted with a restless energy. They reinforced shield generators, rewired broken turrets, and even turned cargo containers into makeshift missile racks. The Alorians watched in wonder. They treat scrap like treasure, one whispered. They are building weapons from nothing. On the ground, human engineers taught Alorian workers to dig trenches, build barricades, and create hidden supply caches. You cannot meet the Vorath in the open, explained Sergeant Ramos, his hands stained with dust. But if you use the land, you can bleed them dry. The Alorians were scholars, not soldiers, yet they followed the instructions. For the first time, they felt there might be a chance. The Vorath did not wait long. Within days, their dark fleet appeared at the edge of the system, blotting out the stars like a spreading storm. The colony trembled. Children cried, elders prayed. The council fleets were still far away. Only the humans stood in their path. The first wave came swift and merciless. Dozens of Vorath ships surged toward the planet, their weapons glowing with deadly fire. The Alorian defense platforms opened fire, but their weapons were too few. It should have been the end, but the humans fought differently. Instead of forming a rigid battle line, they split into small groups, darting between asteroids and debris. Old cargo ships, fitted with hidden cannons, ambushed the enemy from behind. Fighters darted like hornets, striking weak spots, then vanishing before the swarm could catch them. Impossible, gasped an Alorian officer as she watched from the control room. They are outnumbered 10-1, yet they are holding. Captain Elias gave crisp orders, his tone calm even as explosions filled the void. Squad 3, push them into the debris field. Use the mines. Squad 5, target their carriers. Don't give them time to regroup. The Vorath were strong, but they were used to enemies who fought conventionally. Against the humans, they struggled. In the chaos, dozens of Alorian evacuation transports slipped away, carrying civilians to safety. For every human ship that fell, another bought precious time. On the planet's surface, the battle grew fierce. Vorath landing pods streaked through the atmosphere, slamming into the fields near the colony. Monstrous figures poured out, armored and relentless. The Alorian defenders faltered at the sight, but the humans did not. With rifles and explosives, they struck hard, retreating only to lure the enemy into ambushes. Sergeant Ramos led a small unit through the forests, setting traps with wires and explosives hidden under leaves. When the Vorath advanced, the ground erupted beneath them. "Keep moving," Ramos barked. "Hit and run. Never let them pin you down." The Aelorians, though frightened, followed the humans' lead. They used their knowledge of the land to guide soldiers through hidden paths and caves. Together, they turned their peaceful home into a battlefield that the Vorath could not easily claim. The fighting lasted for hours, then days. The relief fleet was battered, many ships reduced to burning wrecks. But each human loss came with heavy Vorath casualties. For the first time in living memory, the swarm was slowed. The Aelorians began to see their new allies differently. These were not reckless fools, as the Council claimed. These were survivors, people who had learned to adapt in the face of overwhelming odds. They were fighters not because they loved war, but because their harsh world had left them no choice. Elder Solian, who had doubted them most, watched a group of humans patching a shattered defense turret with nothing but wires, steel plates, and determination. His voice trembled as he whispered, "They refuse to give up. Even when defeat seems certain, they fight." Another counselor replied softly, "Perhaps that is what it means to be from a death world." The second wave of Vorath forces came stronger than the first, but the humans were ready. They used wreckage from the first battle to build traps in orbit. Broken hulls became floating bombs, detonated at the right moment to shatter enemy squadrons. When one human pilot's fighter was crippled, he rammed it into the largest Vorath vessel, destroying it in a blinding flash. His name was spoken with awe across Aeloria. Even with such bravery, the cost was high. Half the relief fleet was gone, and the survivors were running low on supplies. Yet, instead of retreating, the humans began preparing for the final assault. Captain Elias stood before his weary crews, his voice firm. "We've bought them time, we've saved thousands, but the swarm will not stop until we break them. Tomorrow, they will come with everything, and tomorrow, we will stand." The crews answered with a roar, tired but unshaken. On the colony below, the Aelorians gathered with their human allies. They were no longer strangers. Together they repaired weapons, shared food, and spoke of home. Some of the Aelorians asked why the humans had come at all. One young engineer from Earth smiled faintly. "Because you asked. That's enough reason for us." The word spread across the colony, carried in whispers like a promise. When the night came, the people of Aeloria looked to the sky. The Vorath swarm gathered like a storm cloud, ready to strike with its full might. Yet above them, battered but unbroken, the humans waited, and for the first time the Aelorians dared to hope that tomorrow they might still see the dawn. The dawn rose over Aeloria, painting the sky with golden light, yet the people of the colony did not feel peace. Above their world, the Vorath swarm gathered in terrible numbers. Their ships filled the sky like a sea of black wings, endless and heavy. This was the final strike. The swarm had grown angry. They would crush everything in their path. On the human flagship Resolute, Captain Elias Grant stood before his weary officers. His uniform was torn, his eyes shadowed from sleepless nights, but his voice remained firm. "They will come with everything today," he said. "We are outnumbered, outgunned, and nearly out of supplies. But we are not out of will. The Aelorians trusted us to stand, so we will." No one argued. They all knew what it meant. This was not just another battle. It was survival. The swarm descended. Wave after wave of Vorath ships poured into orbit, firing with blinding fury. The skies shook with explosions. The last of Aeloria's orbital platforms were torn apart. But before they could fall uselessly, human engineers detonated their reactors, turning them into fireballs that took whole squadrons of Vorath with them. "Let them burn with us," growled one engineer as he pressed the final trigger. His voice was steady, his heart calm. The humans fought like no other species the Vorath had faced. Their small ships darted into the swarm like hunters among giants, striking engines and weak points before vanishing into the chaos. Where council fleets would have broken formation, the humans thrived in disorder. They turned wrecks into weapons, silence into traps, and hopelessness into fire. On the ground, the battle raged just as fiercely. The Vorath landed in vast numbers, dark figures spilling across the plains. But the humans and Aelorians together were ready. Trenches exploded with hidden mines. Narrow passes became killing grounds. Villages that had been abandoned now hid snipers and ambush squads. Sergeant Ramos and his unit fought with grim precision, striking then retreating, always forcing the swarm to bleed for every step. Beside him, young Aelorian defenders carried rifles with trembling hands, but they did not run. The humans had taught them that courage was not the absence of fear. It was standing even when fear consumed you. You see? Ramos shouted over the roar of battle. They can bleed. They can break! Hold the line. And for the first time, the Aelorians believed it. Hours passed. The humans were battered, their numbers dwindling. Yet the Vorath were slowed. Each tactic, each sacrifice bought precious time. Still, it was not enough. The swarm's main vessel, a colossal warship bristling with weapons, descended into orbit. Its shadow stretched across the colony like a dark hand. If it reached the surface, everything would be lost. On the bridge of the Resolute, alarms blared. "Captain, their flagship is moving in," cried an officer. "If it lands, we cannot stop them." Elias looked at the screen at the giant ship blotting out the stars. Then he gave his order. "All remaining ships, follow me. We strike now." It was madness. The relief fleet had fewer than a dozen ships left, most of them damaged. But they charged anyway, engines blazing, weapons firing until barrels melted. The Vorath flagship unleashed torrents of fire, tearing human ships apart one after another. Yet the survivors pushed closer. A freighter, its hull cracked open, slammed into the flagship's shields and exploded, ripping a hole in its defenses. A fighter squadron flew straight into the breach, sacrificing themselves to clear the way. The Resolute dove through the flames, its hull burning. On the bridge, Elias stood tall, gripping the railing as the ship shook violently. "Target their core," he ordered. "Give them everything we have left." The last missiles fired, streaking into the enemy's heart. The Vorath flagship erupted in a blinding flash, splitting apart into shards of fire. The shock rippled across the swarm. Leaderless, their formations broke. The humans pressed harder, forcing them back, driving them away from the planet. The battle was not clean. It was not glorious, but it was victory. When the smoke cleared, the skies above Aeloria were littered with wreckage. Human ships drifted broken, many silent forever. Yet the swarm was gone. The Vorath had been beaten back, at least for now. On the surface, the survivors emerged from trenches and shelters. Aelorians and humans stood side by side, their faces streaked with ash and sweat. The colony still stood. Against all odds, it lived. Elder Solian walked slowly through the crowd until he found Captain Elias, who was weary but alive. The elder bowed deeply, his voice heavy with emotion. "You saved us. When we called for aid, the council gave us silence. But you came." Elias shook his head. "We came because you asked. That's all the reason we needed." The elder's eyes shone with tears. "Then let history remember this day, that when hope was lost, it was the Deathworlders of Earth who answered." Days later, the Galactic Council finally arrived. Their fleets filled the system, sleek and polished, ready for a battle already won. They expected ruins. Instead, they found Aeloria standing, defended not by their armies but by a ragtag fleet of humans who had fought with scraps and courage. Council envoys questioned how it was possible. How had so few defeated so many? The Aelorians answered simply, "They are from Earth, they are Deathworlders." To them, impossible is just another challenge. The story spread quickly across the galaxy. Other worlds listened in wonder as the tale was told. Some laughed in disbelief. Others whispered with awe. But one truth remained clear. Humanity had revealed itself. They were not perfect. They were not gentle. But when the galaxy called for help and no one else answered, it was humans who rose, humans who fought, and humans who endured. On Aeloria, children grew up learning a new saying, one carved into the stone of their rebuilt city. When the stars grew dark, it was Earth that lit the flame. And across the stars, the legend of the Deathworlders began.